Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July meeting of the Safety Committee. Do we have any public comments or speakers, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, we have one public speaker, Murray Bowden.
Morning. It's been quite a few weeks, quite a few days. We finally found out what the underlying problem that's been causing all of this stuff. There are people that don't know what the law is, and there are people that have been reading this manual on uniform traffic control devices sort of literally and not correctly. Yesterday I was at the New Jersey Turnpike, and the Deputy Director of Operations is Kevin Dunn, who comes from Washington and was part of the team that writes that manual that everybody thinks is so correct. And I pointed out a diagram that everybody's been following since 2003 that's been absolutely wrong. And Kevin looked at it and said, "Ooh, you're right." Only it was 2000, because he was there when it was written. He's also the guy that designed the correct guide sign down at Tom's River that I had a picture of. He said, "I designed that sign." I said, "Why aren't all of your guide signs that way?" Well, because they've been reading the book literally, thinking that one example in the book was the only one you could use. And it's not. You can use that style of arrow per lane everywhere. And the idiotic signs on a Whitestone Bridge that are the diagrammatic and nobody can understand should never be done again. So we're going forward on a road line. I was here because Mitch said you were going to talk about the railroad crossing lights. Mitch is stuck on a train because there was an accident and he's coming. It's the same thing. You've been reading the book literally about railroad crossing lights. There is nothing in the book that says you can't use traffic lights at railroad crossings. There are thousands of intersections controlled by traffic lights called light rail. That's railroad cars that are lighter in weight. They're no different. They're railroad cars all over Denver, Jersey, Boston, you name it. There are thousands of them. So why don't you use them the other way? Well, because you've been reading the book a little bit too literally. There is absolutely no reason that at East Hampton, where the railroad crossing at the lumberyard is, and you've got both of them there at the same place, remove the flashing red, because it's legal to pass a flashing red. It's not legal to pass a traffic light. We put our red light camera up there, and they work, because I got the ticket on West Side for passing a red light. I know the traffic cameras work. You cannot get a cop at every intersection, but you can put a traffic light there instead of the flashing red. With a traffic
If you could begin to wrap up, Mr. Bowden.
I'm sorry?
If you could begin to wrap up, please.
I am wrapping up. This is a historic meeting. We now understand that there is every reason to use traffic lights. The electronics is there. The same electronic that turns on a flashing red light turns on a traffic light. On a red light camera, you don't have to put a cop at every intersection. This is a historic day. I'm enjoying every minute of it. And thank you.
That was our only public speaker, sir.
Okay. The minutes have been circulated. May I have a motion regarding the minutes? Second. Any comments or questions regarding the minutes or revisions? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. The work plan, Mr. Meyer?
No changes to the work plan. We're continuing to use SMS principles to inform the work plan.
Okay. We'll start to go through the agenda items. The first one, please.
Very good. The first one is a report on fire safety inspections, and Ann Kirsch will describe some of the activities that have been ongoing throughout the MTA agencies to inspect and mitigate against fire risk.
Thank you. Good morning. So as a result of the fire under the Park Avenue Viaduct on May 17th, all of the agencies, along with MTA Real Estate's property tenant manager, Greystone Management Solutions, began a comprehensive review of occupancies and adjacencies to our properties in order to assess potential hazards. This built upon many of the efforts that were already underway at the various agencies. Each of the agencies had a robust fire prevention unit in place The responsibilities of those units were for overseeing fire protection system inspections, hot work permits, tenant issues along the right-of-way in stations and facilities, and semi-annual inspections of all tenant spaces conducted in coordination with Greystone Management Solutions. The fire life safety inspections at the railroads, I apologize, have been continuing for years and in collaboration with the city fire, FDMY, local municipality fire authorities, as well as the other county and state agencies. Inspections of the MTA properties that began on May 17th really were a tremendous effort. All of the agencies partook in these inspections. Metro North, for instance, inspected 98 tenant spaces and 52 stations. New York City Transit, 55 miles of elevated structure. Long Island Railroad conducted inspections along their entire right-of-way, which really included 12.5 linear miles of viaduct and adjacent properties, along with Greystone Management Solutions conducting inspections of 154 occupancies. Out of these inspections, Greystone, out of the 154, really only identified 15 properties that needed follow-up action. So this really goes to the point of the ongoing efforts underway at each of the agencies and the responsibilities that they've had all along. But they are focusing now on all of those areas representing potential risk to MTA operations, ensuring that they've developed procedures associated with those inspections, and making sure that they, continue the coordinated efforts. The ongoing effort exists today with each of the local municipalities. I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. Each of the municipalities, including, of course, as I said, FDNY. So things get referred periodically to the local municipalities when there's a need. If there's an enforcement action, certainly MTA PD gets involved and has participated very closely with all of the inspection efforts to date. Some of the next steps and the ongoing activities are developing databases to monitor and maintain track of each of the inspections and all of those properties of concern. Establishing inspection schedules. Each of the agencies may have various schedules in place. We're looking at that across the agencies to ensure consistency, but they are establishing schedules, and we'll be reviewing that with them. The tenant leases are under review right now. We're looking at what the requirements are for those tenant leases to ensure that any additional restrictions that we may want to impose are put in place there. We're working again with all of the agencies, with the legal departments and the management agency. Also in place, very important, is conducting an employee awareness session so that employees understand what their responsibilities are and what they really are looking for, what they're going to see out there, and what should be identified as potential concern. So, of course, as David mentioned, we're continuing with SMS principles. This, of course, is part of that, and how fire vulnerability risk assessment and SMS all play a role. It's the continuous improvement that we look to formalize. We formalize processes, and that's what we're looking at right now, is formalizing these processes in the form of checklists, developing a checklist worksheet that each of the agencies can follow so that there is a consistent approach to assessing these hazards. Identifying the schedules for inspections, ensuring that we have robust schedules, and they are based on hazard and risk associated. The consistency across the MTA agencies is very important for us. So while there may not be the exact same processes at each of the agencies are different operating and have different operating environments. So there may be some variation, but there'll be consistency at the base of those processes. There'll be a cyclical review, very important in the SMS world, to ensure that we have those schedules set for review, and ensure the processes are followed, identify any lessons learned, and then incorporate those changes from those lessons learned that we see, and then that process will, of course, continue again until we ensure that we have a solid process in place. And that's where we're at so far, and that process will continue. The inspections are ongoing, as we said. There's still a lot of work to be done, but there has been a lot of work to date.
Any comments or questions? Andrew?
When it's up to a city agency or a county agency, and I'll use the example of a coffee shop or a diner under a New York City Transit elevated structure, what can you do? What can MTA do if it's up to the city to do normal inspections of their facilities?
So again, identifying those hazards as we come across them. Each of the agencies are looking at property adjacencies now as a result of this fire. You know, that happened periodically, and if something egregious was identified, they would certainly refer to the agencies that they work very closely with on a regular basis, like FDNY or New York City. But now they're really looking at that much harder and ensuring that anything out of the ordinary, if they see a propane tank, as you saw in some of the photos, 50 feet from the railroad tracks, if you see containers underneath the viaduct, if you see construction sites like that, they're bringing those to the attention of the authority having jurisdiction.
And how frequently are these rights-of-way being inspected?
Right now, it's based on hazard and risk, so they've done a first cut review of everything, and the higher risk locations are being reviewed twice a year, and all other properties essentially across all the agencies are annually.
That would change. If you, for example, in a twice yearly inspection found somebody that wasn't in compliance, you could come back more frequently. Certainly the incident underneath Park Avenue Viaduct raised a level of sensitivity for us as well as the city. And both of those parties, both us and they, are committed to, if there's doubt, we're going to err on the side of caution and go in and do a further inspection. But certainly just because somebody says we do it twice a year doesn't mean it automatically follows that. If someone's not performing correctly, we will go in more often.
To add to that, we had very good cooperation with the fire department, so any of those locations that were privately owned that we felt we really needed to get into, we worked with the fire department. They went with us, so if they saw any violations, they issued them right there. They may have made them do something right at the time while they were there, so we did get very good cooperation with them, so we'll continue that.
And I can probably think of 8 major commercial streets that have an elevated train running over them with countless, diners, restaurants, stores. Who knows what's going on in those? So thank you for that.
We heard in a committee meeting earlier this week that, or it was suggested that there's still a fair amount of debris under that Park Avenue bridge. Is that correct, in fact? And
You know, we visited that location just yesterday, and it wasn't my first trip there. And you know, there are businesses operating underneath the viaduct. You know, honestly, with the benefit of hindsight, if I had the chance to locate them there, would I do it? No, probably not. But the reality is that they're significantly cleaned up, significantly less fuel load under there, less fire load under there. And the situation, while it may not be perfect, is significantly mitigated, and there's an enormous amount of cooperation between Metro North Railroad and the fire department, and a great deal of progress has been made there.
so is it fair, and I assumed when I heard that the other day, the things that were described as being under there sounded like they were not, in fact, fuels, which seemed to be what was originally caused the heat intensity. Is that a fair assumption? That, I mean, there may be debris or some storage things under there, but they're not of a risk that of the type that existed before.
They're not goods that would be sold as fuel, like propane or firewood or something like that. They are things that could burn, so they're properly classified as fuel, but they're not the sort of thing that you and I would think of as something you would sell someone as fuel.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, next item, please.
So we'll move on to talk about the MTA Bus Safety Symposium, and there's a presentation in your committee book on the Bus Safety Symposium. Many of us are familiar with the city's Vision Zero program, and that program is consistent with programs elsewhere in the United States and elsewhere in the world. and its goal is improving safety, particularly for pedestrians and bicyclists on city streets. And some concerns, as many of you may know, were raised about city buses, transit buses, and whether or not we could make buses safer for use on city streets with respect to these road users, as well as other questions about could we better train our operators, could we improve safety through technology, and these kinds of questions really drove the chairman's desire to hold a safety symposium dedicated on buses. So if we could move on to the next slide. This shows our very generic, very general theme for the day-long event that we held. Let's see the big picture. And you can see us reflecting in the logo there for the event, the road users that we were particularly interested in trying to assess safety for. So the next slide presents a little bit of a summary of the day. This event was held on May 10th and really addressed. It was attended by, and the participants were a really great cross-section of the industry. There were academic researchers, representatives from bus manufacturers, transit professionals from other transit properties, as well as our own, union representatives, and regulators from a variety of federal agencies. The expectation that pedestrians and cyclists will be on our roadways is only increasing as the trend toward taking public transportation as opposed to car ownership is increasing. And in fact, just a week or two ago in the New York Times, I saw a story on crowded New York City sidewalks and the propensity of pedestrians to spill out into the streets. So this is very much a relevant topic. So this slide shows the very beginning of the event. It shows our chairman and CEO offering some words of welcome to the participants and introducing the administrator of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the federal agency that's responsible for traffic safety, Dr. Mark Rosekind, who delivered keynote remarks and really set the stage for the work of the day. So the next slide begins to kind of summarize a little bit about what Dr. Rosekind said to everyone present. Almost 32,000 roadway fatalities occur each year in our country, and Dr. Rosekind very clearly indicated that the goal of the federal government, and obviously we share this goal, is 0 fatalities. He also described a little bit about how he is directing NHTSA to change its approach with respect to reducing fatalities. He described the old approach as react to the problem, punish the offenders, mitigate the circumstances, and his new approach is much more proactive, trying to aim toward preventing crashes in the first place, better use of technology, better training for drivers, and I summarize this because I think it really parallels our own evolving safety thoughts from toward SMS and toward being as proactive as we can with respect to doing safety at MTA agencies. So the NHTSA administrator pointed out that the data show that traffic fatalities in the city, in our city, are declining, and that's of course a good thing, but the ability to move the trend in the right direction presents an opportunity to build upon success, and he challenged us to do exactly that. He described the issues particularly for unprotected road users, those bicyclists and pedestrians that I mentioned, and he indicated what we all know is that large vehicles present a particular challenge for unprotected roadway users. So he encouraged us to do the work that we need to do to make the improvements that are required. And I pulled this quote out of his prepared remarks because I thought it was particularly poignant. I think you'll probably agree with it. He told the audience that bus operators need to be commended for the incredibly important work they do. They provide mobility to millions who might not otherwise have it, and they're focused on the safety of their passengers and the people around them. So he really recognized the challenges of being a bus operator. So the next slide just shows a little bit about what occurred during the day. The person at the podium is Dr. Andrew Crum, who's presenting some of his own research on vehicle safety, and in the audience is Brian Sherlock, who is with the ATU, and Brian has really been a catalyst on these issues, and we were pleased to have him attend our program. And the next slide just gives me an opportunity. There's a whole team of people, many of them are sitting over here, but there's a whole team of people who planned this event and made it a success. But two folks who particularly contributed to the day. On the left, Dr. Shashi Kupa of NHTSA, Dr. Rosekind's staff, who is the chief of the Special Vehicles and Systems Division at NHTSA. She really was unfamiliar with this issue, but got tasked to prepare a presentation, serve on a panel, and she did some original statistical research that really helped us grapple with the problem, and she was very engaged throughout the day. And on the right is our friend and colleague at New Jersey Transit, Gardner Tabon, who is the chief safety officer there, who moderated a couple of panel discussions for us and contributed greatly by doing so. So a little bit of a summary. As I'd mentioned, more than 32,000 roadway fatalities occur in our country each year. Transit buses are relatively uninvolved in these fatalities. On an average year, there are about 35 pedestrian fatalities and 9 bicyclist fatalities that have an involvement of transit buses. So that is good news, but as I said at the outset, our goal is 0, so we want to do everything that we can to improve that. Being guided by the science and Dr. Kupa's work, we understand that most fatalities occur not during a turn, but when a bus is traveling straight across an intersection. And the next slide provides a little bit of a statistical summary that highlights that. Most pedestrian and bicycle fatalities occur when a bus is operating straight rather than maneuvering left or right. Moving on to some current studies. Oh, go ahead.
More importantly, does the data show who was at fault for these accidents?
You know, most of these kinds of events from a safety perspective as opposed to a liability or a blame assignment perspective are investigated from the perspective of, regardless of who's at fault, what can be done to mitigate? Was the crash preventable? And so that's usually what Steve Vidal and his team look at based on National Safety Council principles and basic safety science. So
the newest bus designs that I understand are going to give the bus operator greater visibility of the conditions around him or her, correct?
Yes, and we'll talk about that in just a minute.
Oh, okay.
Not in detail, but you're exactly right.
Never going to stop.
So some things that are happening that we were briefed on during the symposium is that the Federal Transit Administration is assessing safety standards for transit buses and assessing the degree to which obscured visibility, what you're talking about, could be improved. As this committee has been briefed in the past, the MTA is pilot testing 2 safety technologies on buses on New York City streets, a pedestrian warning system and a collision avoidance system. And we're certainly not alone in wanting to try new stuff. Transit agencies across the country have installed technologies such as front view cameras to try to assess preventability in when there are crashes, and other technologies such as flashing lights on mirrors to try to mitigate collision risk. And in fact, New Flyer, a very prominent bus manufacturer, has made some recent design changes that offer greater visibility for operators, and they've reduced the size of some structural components on the buses to improve visibility. And New York City Transit plans to evaluate this design in September when the pilot bus for a new procurement is delivered. So the intent is not only for the manufacturers to improve visibility, for us to give it a test drive on the roads and see if it really performs as intended. So the symposium concluded with a variety of recommendations for future action. We definitely don't believe our work is done. We want to continue to push for further work in this direction. We learned that there are very few standards that govern the design of buses with respect to operator visibility. So we recommended that the FTA assemble a team to really determine what an operator needs to be able to see and set some standards. We recommended some future research, and we're monitoring for funds availability to determine if we can participate in some of that activity. We were briefed, Dr. Kupa's work briefed us that there are extensive standards for school bus visibility that are not carried over into transit buses, and so there may be some applicability there. And there's just a whole variety of work that's being looked at. You can go on to the next slide. One recommendation was that bus operators participate in design work that pertains to the operator compartment, greater exchange of information, particularly with European operators and designers, and certainly the notion was expressed that we as a transit agency need to do everything we can do to provide the safest bus and the best trained and best prepared operator, but there is a shared responsibility among those who share the roadways to ensure that pedestrians and bicyclists who are alert and aware of their surroundings as well. So this is really just a sampling of what was discussed during the meeting. You can move on to the next slide. There's a website that's publicly accessible. It's in your committee book that has more photographs of the event, 12-minute video that we produced to try to summarize some of the activities, and it also contains a white paper that we reproduced in your books as well that goes into more detail on what we, the group assembled in the MTA, believes can be done to improve safety for unprotected road users. So the event was, I think, genuinely a service to our industry, and it really was an opportunity for the MTA to demonstrate its commitment and leadership on this important issue.
I didn't interrupt David during the presentation, but I find myself to be continually amazed. I've been associated with safety for a greater part of my career, 10 years leading functions. And the term that we've come to use in dealing with some complicated issues, especially like Ebola, which is a safety issue, actually a medical issue, is guided by the science. And I'm always amazed that when you have someone, and the scientist who literally distilled the data that NHTSA had with respect to accidents, not a subject matter expert in terms of bus operator performance by any stretch of the imagination, and she said as much. But the numbers tell you a story, and in some cases, they lead you away from biases that you may have. Because I would have thought going into it that the overwhelming majority of the fatalities would have been on a turning maneuver, and that's not the case. It's a head-on maneuver. So you have to deal with both of the hazards associated with what a bus operator would face, but I still think we need to be guided by the science, because wherever we're going to make improvements, irrespective of what the cost level of effort is, we need to target them in areas where we're getting, hopefully, towards zero reduction, but the best return on the investment. And I found that, and actually we need to keep mining that database, because there's just a lot of information in terms of all the bus properties across the country. Comments or questions? Mitch?
I found the straight line discussion very interesting, because I think we all had the perception that the left turn or a turning movement was the more hazardous situation, and I find that to be very interesting. Did we, I assume, the NHTSA researcher analyzed the question beyond the straight line issue as to whether or not that meant the bus was stopped at an intersection and then was moving, or was the bus moving when the accident occurred, not stopped at an intersection? Because those are two completely different situations, obviously, and relate to two completely different aspects of the sharing of the road scenario, which you clearly point out with the pedestrian and the bicyclist. So I was interested as to whether or not they went further than that to figure out where they occurred and what was the bus doing when they occurred.
I think to the extent within the limitations of the data source she's using, she did try to assess that. But you're right; they present two completely different scenarios, and certainly in the city, we see both of those scenarios. We may see either distracted pedestrians or bicyclists maneuver into our buses, and we see other scenarios as well.
What we've had in other areas when we're doing an accident investigation, sometimes when you get a finding like that and that question gets raised, it may require us to, in the accident investigation, ask additional questions that we had not asked before. And especially if your focus, like my focus, is on turning incidents more than straight, it would put me in a different place. And that's an ongoing process. I mean, Steve and Cheryl and what they do in terms of accident investigation after the fact is in some way, shape, or form driven by what information they need to gather from that incident. Did you want to elaborate, Cheryl?
Yeah, we actually did a hazard assessment where we analyzed all of our pedestrian accidents and categorized them and came up with the same scenario that she did. The when the bus is going straight, we had the most number of pedestrian accidents. And your question as to what type, most of them were when the bus was moving in a straight line, not necessarily stopped at an intersection. So
That's my
Yes.
question.
in the ones that we analyzed,
If the bus obviously stops at the intersection.
Right.
Okay? So the question that I would raise is when the bus starts, because it has to start, is that when the accident occurs?
No.
Or is it before the bus gets to the
Yes,
intersection?
it was before the bus, yes.
Okay,
In our
Okay.
incidents.
okay. Because, as I said, those are two completely different scenarios and may have impacts on traffic safety devices, which may or may not be at that particular intersection, whether or not the traffic light and the pedestrian walk signs are integrated correctly, so a pedestrian doesn't feel that they are free to go when the bus thinks it's free to go in that context.
Can I interject also? One of the things we see when we look at the analysis that Charles' group and my group do together is really the importance of bus stop placements. Historically, from my perspective, a far side bus stop where you're actually servicing the bus stop after the intersection mitigates a lot of your potential for a catastrophic kind of accident. And we've been working very closely with our colleagues at DOT to identify bus stops where we are currently on the near side, and then advancing through an intersection after servicing the bus stop. And we've made a lot of progress in that. Up until the Real Vision Zero initiative 2 years ago, getting a bus stop moved for a safety argument was not that easy to do. And it seems like over the last 2 years, we've really made a lot of progress. So that's the kind of analysis that really drives home the need for it. And, it's very incremental. We need to just keep plugging away at it. But your point's very well taken.
Thank you.
Some of the city DOT representatives who participate in those decisions were participants in the symposium as well.
Norman?
Yeah, let me actually a little bit about the data. I mean, it's interesting to me that you get a different perspective when you're looking at a whole mass of data than you're looking at a particular incident where you may or may not be able to figure out what happened. But if you look at this big mass of data, now a lot of the data here is federal, national data. How much of that do you have? I mean, I'm assuming you have it much more finely dissected than this report would indicate, that each one of these fatalities or even the collisions would also indicate speed of the bus. I mean, it occurred to me it's much more likely to kill somebody when you're going 40 miles an hour in a bus than when you're going 5 miles an hour, and that may be part of why you see less with the conflicts.
Yeah, a couple of comments. I mean, I've worked with that same database in an earlier life, and that database, while it is the best data available for nationwide fatality analysis, it does have a variety of limitations. The data available in New York City are actually richer. And if you've ever sat down in Steve Vidal's office as he's examining the results of an investigation, you realize that he's got reams of paper beyond what are available to the federal government when they do their nationwide analyses. So I don't necessarily take it for granted that New York City data will mirror federal standards just because of all the unique situations there. But that said, the New York City Transit's Office of Strategic Initiatives has taken a deep dive into this data. I know Steve and his team have as well, and there's a team working at the city, and we're all working together to try to understand trends within New York City.
But you do need to look at the agency of injury or what the mitigating actual act was that resulted in the fatality. If it's blunt force trauma, that'd be one. If it's running over or a drag, it's something different, and those are generally more prevalent on lower speed moves and turns than they are on like a high speed collision and impact.
Well, it's sort of a macabre business, but still though, are you developing, each time you look at one of these statistics, it occurs to me, I mean, I looked at the website thing too, there's about 4 other ways you would look at the same thing. Is your database enriching as you go through this exercise? Are you looking and saying we really need to know more data on this particular area, or are you happy with the way MTA statistics are broken out relative to the national viewpoint?
First of all, we try to take the information that we can coalesce out of an investigation and immediately incorporate it into all of our training initiatives. So each individual fatal accident or even a serious pedestrian accident, the root causes of those are shared immediately with the workforce. So on an individual basis, it's valuable just from that. The onboard cameras that we have on our buses now really allow us to share with our workforce things that actually happened and give us an ability to diagnose what could have been done differently or not. So on an individual basis, I think each accident has a really great value to it. Looking at the bigger picture, we allocate resources, because there's a finite amount of resources. We allocate resources to where there's a high accident trending line. And we monitor more closely intersections where we see multiple kind of accidents. So we're using it, in a real time with one incident. We're looking at it for trends, and then in a bigger picture, we really work closely with Cheryl's folks when they do the hazard assessment with a larger data a pool. It really starts to bring together the bigger picture. So there's no perfect science to it other than just got to keep plugging and plugging and plugging and trying to get whatever kernel information you can and sharing it with the folks to hopefully make the next accident not happen.
Yeah, well, that occurred to me too, but I mean, you're looking at it too, it said the last 12 months, you've had that after a 20-year trend of decreasing every year, in the last 12 months, you've had more incidents. Now, obviously, statistically, you can't decrease every year all the time. I don't know how the numbers break down in your view of, is this a radical thing where you think, oh my God, the statistic went up? I mean, somebody would pick that out and say we're failing because the last year, but if you look at it over time, there's a cycle to everything, and it occurs to me that may be what's occurring. But have you taken any special study of the last, I think it was the last 12 months was what they
That's
said?
actually part of my presentation later on, so you want to defer it to that, and then that's definitely in my conversation.
So if I would just shut up, you'd get to that.
But I think it's a good discussion, because and your point's well taken. There's an axiom in railroading for employee safety. Assume any train is moving on any track in any direction at any time. And that kind of guides the randomness of how you're going to deal with the situation. We are entering a new paradigm when it comes to pedestrian safety on the street, and we've talked about it before. Because when I went to driver's ed, it was intersections, random acts part of motorcycle drivers, in areas where children are playing coming out between parked cars. The more people are paying to electronic devices and playing games, the randomness of that behavior is increasing. So that we can't change, so we have to react to that. Just come down here and take a look down here, because you've got a number of lanes closed off, and you've got the randomness of behavior on these streets down here is far different than it was 5 or 10 years ago. But like I said, we can't, by decree, change the randomness of that behavior, so we're going to have to do it. So it's part of that ongoing dialogue. Just shout.
In a sense, you're like caught by your own success too, because I mean, there's so many factors that lead into each one of these, so many parts of the function that determine whether there's going to be contact between a pedestrian and a bus. It is a huge random issue, and it occurred to me too that as things become more safe on the roads, the pedestrians, which one thing that's going to happen is they're going to become more comfortable with their space, and that will incline them to come closer and closer to the, for the most part, the pedestrian, I do defend the pedestrian behavior in New York. I think it's really, really good when you look at it in the totality, but like everything else in New York City, there's 8 million people here, so a lot of crap happens, but it always kills me is people just standing in the road where they're really only 9 inches from a moving vehicle that is just, and usually playing with their phone, and it just is amazing how many people you see doing that. It's terrifying to me, really.
Mr. Murr?
Permit me a comment on a more granular basis. I made the comment on Monday that we see regularly in the city of New York, particularly in Manhattan. Federal Express, UPS, and other trucks parked, double parked, right in front of the bus stop, forcing the bus driver into a pattern that takes him across 2 and sometimes 3 lanes in order to get out from after delivering a passenger. There we can do something. If the city of New York will go about giving these folks tickets, not just on an agreement basis that you at UPS are going to pay X dollars for all the tickets you collect for the year, and you at FedEx, which, by the way, probably is a good defense to every driver in New York that there's discriminatory law enforcement. And if that's a suggestion, it's made. My point being, we can do something. If the city of New York will take the time to do something about getting those trucks either to park legally or to park in an area where they can park. But what they're doing is they're forcing the bus drivers to do something stupid, and that's not their fault.
Any other comments? It's a good point, Mr. Murdler. Next item.
We're getting a little tight on time. With your permission, though, I'd like to take a brief diversion from the agenda
Sure.
and talk a little bit about grade crossings, because that was requested on Monday. It's not in your books. We just put together a couple of quick slides. I don't want to shortchange agenda items 6 and 7 that we need some time for, so I just want to make a few points rather quickly on grade crossings. First of all, just to kind of reacquaint you with the extent of this particular safety issue, there are more than 5,000 crossings in New York State. That includes both public and private crossings. I don't tend to think that distinction is as important as other people make it, but a private crossing is one where a private authority maintains the roadway, and a public crossing is one where the state or a municipality or some other public entity maintains the roadway that travels across the tracks. Go back one moment just to make the point that there are just a little bit over 400 grade crossings on the MTA's 2 railroads, both public and private. One point to make: nationwide, there are probably almost 250,000 grade crossings. Almost the huge majority of them are protected by passive devices, just crossbuck signs and pavement markings. In New York State, 75%, 3/4 of crossings have active devices, gates and flashers, and for MTA crossings, about 85% have active devices. So, all right. So, we've spent a lot of time observing motorist behavior at crossings, and what we see nationwide is that motorists are often trying to race slow-moving freight trains and drive around gates. That's not so much the problem that we see in the metropolitan area. What we see is motorists who are stopping on tracks, sometimes in a queue of vehicles moving slowly across the crossing, or as occurred overnight, actually, inadvertently turning down the tracks, apparently mistaking the highway-rail intersection for a highway-highway intersection. So our task, kind of self-imposed, is that we need to do what we can to try to modify motorist behavior at these crossings. So go ahead. For 85 years, the traffic signage and traffic control devices that are permissible for crossings have been very highly standardized using the MUTCD, the Manual and Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's a book that's allows a great degree of flexibility, while at the same time is very prescriptive on what motorists see, so that a motorist driving across a railroad crossing in South Carolina sees exactly the same thing as a motorist driving across a grade crossing in New York or Connecticut. And the next slide just shows a couple of diagrams that I didn't want to try to go into in any detail, but we just put them in there because they show you the degree of specification that occurs in the manual. The diameter of a light, the width between lights, exactly how far from the nearest rail goes the pavement marking. It's a very detailed manual. So the next. It's been asked, why don't we do something different? Why don't we put up traffic lights? Why don't we make another treatment? We've consulted the manual. We've also talked directly with the experts who write the manual. There are some very limited circumstances under which traffic lights can be used at grade crossings, but those specifically are at industrial crossings, switching operations, very low-speed operations, or in very limited cases, not mainline high-speed operations, which is what we have here. So in general, the use of traffic lights at grade crossings is not something that the federal government or the manual looks favorably on. And one reason is because the underlying philosophy of the manual is to make grade crossings look physically different from highway intersections to try to dissuade a motorist from mistaking the track for a roadway and turning down it. And
Were the federal lights on, but were the federal regulations made for rural freight type grade crossings as opposed to urban, commuter or light rail operations?
I have a feeling, since most grade crossings are rural, that your concern is probably a little bit warranted, but the intent of the regulations is that they apply universally. There are particular opportunities to use traffic lights at certain kinds of bridges, and that's movable bridges. And so sometimes driving around the metropolitan area, since we have a lot of movable bridges, drawbridges, swing bridges, you see gates and traffic lights, and that is specifically an application where traffic lights are warranted for use. It's very different from a grade crossing because it's a different situation. At a grade crossing, there's a requirement on the motorist to yield and eventually stop and give way to the train. At a movable bridge where the right-of-way is absent for a period of time, that's a very different situation. So on the next slide, this is an example of a bridge that leads into the Bronx from Manhattan, where it is actually a swing bridge, and there are gates and traffic lights used, and that's totally described and permitted by the manual, and it's a very different application than a grade crossing where it's prohibited. So the next slide, just very briefly, some ongoing efforts that we're doing. We're working very closely with federal regulators and federal partners, and we've designed some alternate pavement markings and treatments, and have actually designed a sensor suite that has been installed at some crossings to monitor motorist behavior, and we're empirically looking to be guided by the science to see if we can distract the distracted driver and affect motorist behavior toward greater safety. What's on the next slide? That's it. Good. All right.
Mitch, sure.
Two questions. I amplify Andrew's point. I'm sure we all agree that the great majority of grade crossings occur in, I'll just take my example, non-suburban areas. We don't have too many grade crossings in the city of New York. I don't know whether you have any. Okay,
Oh, we do. Montauk branch of the Long Island Railroad freight operation, definitely.
Right, okay. So the great majority of them are in suburban communities in our service territory. Other places have other issues. And I'm not convinced, and I've been, in the transportation field for 40 years, in the state legislature, I'm not convinced the manual understands that at the moment, okay, or has understood it. Because a driving situation in a suburban, congested, very congested area is significantly different than the middle of South Dakota. That doesn't make it the safety issue more or less important in either place. It's just a different driving environment. And I'm not convinced that the manual completely understands that in its current context. And
Or our kind of training.
or our situations, okay? And, we should, obviously, we can't do it on our own, but, it may be time for us and other suburban entities to ask the NHTSA and the federal government to do a new review of grade crossing issues in suburban areas, because, as I said, the congestion only gets worse. The combination of technology, both in its good points and its bad points, makes for more distracted driving. We all understand that. The amount of congestion makes people, what's a good word? Want to get to their next location quicker than they might otherwise be able to do, me included. So, as I said, I think it may be something we should, and our other sister agencies, look at with them to see what can be done about that, because it is a different situation.
We agree. First of all, we're probably long overdue for having the consultant we have under contract to take a look at grade crossings in. Rick Campbell sits on the body that reviews the MUCTD. It is a living document. It has changed in the 30 years that I've been associated with it, and it will continue to change. And certainly passenger rail operation, I mean, there are decisions made for high-speed rail that there won't be a grade crossing. It'll be grade separated.
Right.
We don't have that luxury, and we can't go back.
Right.
But the points you raise in terms of where the MUCTD started and how it has evolved, is it fully addressing the hazards that we experience, is a very, very equitable question, and we've got to raise that. We're doing and expanding the envelope, and the governor has asked us to expand the envelope in terms of our approach to this and not be bound by MUCTD and things where people think practice dictates future behavior for a standard or regulation. And so, and we probably should have a presentation just to update where we're at and actually show people how we're trying to change it. And actually the term distracted came from somebody that was directly related with the MUCTD. Because I mean, the one thing that probably, all you need to do is to take somebody to Mineola, where the trains go through at 79 miles an hour without stopping at a grade crossing. Somebody who's more familiar with grade crossings, not some other parts of the country, because even in some places where freight trains go through pretty fast, you see them a long ways coming. You don't see them a long ways coming at Mineola. So your point's well taken. So,
because I mean, I could give you, I think I'm a pretty good driver, and I understand the driver-train scenario in which the train doesn't stop and has right-of-way. And I could tell you places that I travel in Suffolk County that I'm looking, and I don't know what to do. Okay? I don't know whose fault it is. I'm not here to blame fault. Just the configuration of the track, in many cases 2 tracks, and the roadway system that was not designed for the amount of traffic it has today, leads to lights being there and right arrows that I'm saying to myself, I'm not going, okay? I'm not moving. And I don't, those are things we obviously, and I don't think it's anybody's fault, but they obviously have evolved over a period of time. They might have been great on Long Island in the 1950s. They're not so great on Long Island in the 21st century, and because of the things that have changed. And that's my concern with the book as it is at the moment.
And we share that concern, and we have made it very clear to our federal partners that we want to push the envelope on the book some, and they're actually excited by that and want to work with us as we test some new stuff and see if it's effective.
And what we're talking about has applications to at least 5 other big cities in the
Oh,
country.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, if not
Well,
nationwide.
With a big commuter rail system.
but even light rail and street operation, it does.
Yep.
Okay, we do need to meet cognizant of the agenda, but these are very good points, and we will make a point of having a presentation.
So the last 2 agenda items are tightly related, 6 and 7. 6 is safety metrics. Just I'd make the point that in your book is repeated the safety metrics that were presented to the operating committees on Monday. There's not a plan to review them in any detail here. Instead, what we did in accordance with the work plan is prepared a presentation for item 7, which I intended to be launching out on about 20 minutes ago. But this is really sort of a detailed look at customer and employee safety, and the ask that I gave the safety officers from around the MTA was, rather than just pick your safety metrics and brief the committee on what the numbers are, pick 1 or 2 things in the numbers and 1 or 2 activities that you may be up to that you think are important, and provide an opportunity for the committee to get a little window into your world and why that's important to you and what you're doing about it. So with that said, we'll just launch into it.
So we're going to start with New York City Transit and Cheryl.
Okay. So our first slide, normally we report on subway customer accidents. That's one of our criteria that we report on monthly. Overall, we had a 7.5% decrease in the last 12 months. 80% of the accidents are slip, trip, fall incidents, and 90% of them occur in stations. In an effort to reduce these accidents, the Division of Stations has a program for the 25 stations with the highest number of slip, trip, fall incidents. And these are normally our high-volume stations, and they're reviewed on a quarterly basis and adjusted accordingly. This initiative is routinely audited by System Safety, and we check to see that station supervisors are conducting daily inspections and station maintenance personnel are conducting bi-weekly inspections of those stations. We also verify station defects are being properly identified, classified, and corrected. And in the slide there, you can see one of my employees in System Safety doing a station inspection. Another initiative is our public awareness campaign, which we target slip, trip, and fall and other areas. We use car cards, posters, brochures, on-the-go sign messaging, MetroCard messaging, and station announcements. The next slide is another area that we report on monthly is employee lost time accidents. We had a 7% increase in the last 12 months period. Two key accident categories are slip, trip, fall incidents and overexertion. Although we saw a decrease in slip, trip, fall incidents, that category accounted for over 20% of our accidents. Overexertion incidents were up 6.3% in the last 12-month period. Some of the programs that are targeting these areas are employee awareness initiatives involving pre-job briefings, management employee discussions during field observations, newsletters and posters, and hazard assessments on specific job tasks, such as train operators boarding and alighting the train from the roadbed, applying the handbrake properly, track worker and station cleaner lifting tasks. We're also developing short instructional videos that will be on targeted job tasks that will be shown in crew quarters at many locations. And we're also identifying new equipment that can assist with tasks that are very manual in nature. One such is the critter, which you can see in the center slide picture. And we did a video and had a discussion on that at one of our previous safety committee meetings. We're also testing a stair climbing device that can be used to move equipment. So the next slide shows another area that we report on monthly. We had an 11% decrease in subway fires over the last 12 months, and all fires during that time period were average or low severity. 72% of the fires occurred along the right-of-way, and 64% of those involved debris. So to address fires, cleaning schedules are routinely adjusted based on the amount of debris collected and the history of fires at various locations. Pre-established flagging locations have been identified, so flagging for cleaning tasks can be set up more efficiently. And there's also an executive committee that meets monthly to review trends and make adjustments as necessary. All divisions within subways are on the committee along with system safety.
Cheryl,
Sure.
or Tom, what's the status of our third vacuum train?
I don't have the exact schedule of when they will be arriving, but
They're on order. I think they come in starting at the end of 17 into 18.
the next slide shows our roadway worker protection joint track safety audit program, which is one of the leading indicators that we report on. Audits are conducted by teams of system safety and TW personnel in an effort to prevent serious injuries or fatalities on the right-of-way. Some of the areas that are evaluated are flagging, setup, third rail safety, lighting, housekeeping, personal protective equipment, pre-job safety briefings with employees. So far, we're on target to meet our audit goal, and we're finding 98.9% compliance during the inspections that we are doing. We also investigate close call near miss incidents that we take a look at to see whether or not our programs are working. And we have not had any incidents relative to improper flagging or third rail safety so far this year. So now I'd like to have Steve. Sure.
With regard to the slip, trip, and falls of customers,
Yes,
leave the workers out of the equation.
yes.
One would assume that the slip, trip, and fall happens when somebody is trying to run to the train. One would assume. Have we seen any difference in that based upon the countdown clock installation? Because if I know the next train is leaving in 2 minutes, I might not run to get to the existing train because I know the next train's coming in 2 minutes. If I don't know when the next train is coming, and I assume it's coming in 20 minutes, regardless of when it's coming, because that's what it feels like, obviously, I'm going to run to the train that's there or the train that's almost there, and one would assume that would cause more likely an accident. Is there any correlation between the two, or am I just making an assumption that doesn't
We
exist?
haven't seen any correlation, but I can, look into it further. I know that, customer behavior is a big issue, running on the platforms, running down the stairs, running to catch a train.
Right.
So you're right. I'll try to look at that and see whether or not I can.
Because that might have assuming there may be, that might have an impact on where we put the countdown clock scenario. The earlier the person knows when the next train is coming, the more likely or less likely they may be not to run quickly to get the train that they know may be there. Especially if the countdown clock is at the bottom of the stairs or where they enter the station as opposed to being on top of the stairs where they've already run. I use that obviously at Penn Station when I take the 1, 2, 3, the 2 and the 3 here. I'm walking through, I see, okay, the 2 is there, but the next 3 is 2 minutes. So my response is, okay, I'm not running because I only got 2 minutes. If I didn't know when the next train was coming, I'd run like heck to get up the stairs to get to the one that's there because I don't know when the next one's coming. So that may have a correlation where we put the signs so that the more information people have in advance, maybe, the less likely they will be to do something we don't want them to do.
Although it's been 30 years since I had Cheryl's job, 31, the highest agency of injury category was moisture or a slippery condition on the platform. Wasn't somebody running for a train. But we'll be guided by the science. We'll take a look at the data. And certainly the issue of countdown clocks does put people, more at ease in some ways.
A good job of making sure that our stations are in good conditions, through the audit program that we have, through the station program that we have. So, conditions are good in the stations, so we will look into that.
Chuck?
Could we take a look, in case you're not already doing it, at the treads on the outdoor stairs for outdoor stations, whether it be subways or trains? And could we do that at this time of year rather than waiting for the problem to be exacerbated come winter with snow and ice? There are a number of stations that I've seen in the Bronx where the passage of time has just worn down the treads.
We'll look at that.
We can look at that.
Yeah, just a quick question, and we can get on with your program. How far have you gone with the fixed flagging? I mean, how ubiquitous is that in the system?
It's so far they've put flagging out at 284 stations, and there's something like 4,600 different placards out there. So they're able to identify the exact location of where the flags would be located, so that when they get out there, they can right away put them in the right position, so that it increases efficiency of the cleaning task.
Okay, let's move it along, please. Are you done, Cheryl, or? Thank you. Stephen?
Okay, I'm going to talk about two of our performance indicators that we reported every month. Those are bus collisions and collision injuries, just briefly. As Commissioner Brown's indicated earlier, over the past 12 months, we've seen an increase in our collisions per million miles, which is really in contrast to a 25-year trend that we had, where we have actually reduced our collisions per million miles by approximately 50%. So in the last 12 months, our collision rate is up 9.6%, which equates to about 5 collisions per every million miles. On the collision injury rate, though, it's been flat over the last 12 months. It's actually up 0.5 of 1%. But that's following a 12-month period previously where we had a 12.3% improvement. So we made some real significant inroads in the previous year, which we've been able to sustain. More importantly, we look at our pedestrian collisions, which is not one of our reported items that we give you every month, but pedestrian accidents over the last 12 months are down by 6%. And that follows a year, the previous year, where we were down by another 16%. So over the last 2 years, since we've really been focusing on Vision Zero, we're down by 23%. To Commissioner Brown's point, we look at every accident. My staff actually rates every single collision that our buses are involved in. And we apply, as David said earlier, the National Safety Council Standard for Preventability, which essentially says that an accident is preventable if the operator doesn't do everything reasonable to prevent the accident from happening. Whether or not it's his fault or her fault, it's a preventable accident if he didn't do everything reasonable to prevent it. What we're seeing over the last 24 months is a significant increase in the number of non-preventable accidents. Those are accidents where, when we evaluate the circumstances of the accident, we don't see anything reasonable that the operator could have done differently. So we're seeing a spike in that. Over the last 12 months, it went up by 15%, and over the last 24 months, it's been up by 25%. So it's a changing dynamic for us, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Two of the safety programs to just address these two initiatives are really a layered approach to sharing information, sharing best practices. We formulated, along with System Safety, what we call an AGM oversight committee, safety oversight committee. And the AGMs of each of our borough road operations meet on a regular basis with our folks from bus safety and training, along with System Safety. And we just look at the data, identify trends, strategize our outreach to our partners, particularly DOT, as to where we want to prioritize requests for modifications to routing or to bus stops. And that group works really closely together to just kind of like share their best practices. The second layer approach is to have a divisional safety committee, which is chaired by the general manager in each of the divisions. And this one, we bring in our union partners along with the road operations, and we look at every route and all the statistics on each of the routes in each of the depots to try to come up with areas of concern. And the feedback from our operators to these meetings is really critical, as to sometimes they're seeing things that don't appear in the trend line quite yet, and they're bringing it to our attention much earlier on. Next slide. What I'd like to share on this slide is, the collision increase that we're seeing really reflects a growing trend citywide. If you look at the NYPD's website and you look at their Comcast data, citywide over the last 12 months, collisions that are responded to and regenerate a police report have increased by over 6%. They went from 208,000 collisions on a 12-month basis to 222,000. That's from the NYPD. So we're seeing the trend not just with our buses, but we're seeing it citywide. We face ever-increasing challenges. The environment changes from day to day. As Tom mentioned earlier, you walk downstairs and you see road lane constraints. One day they're there, and the next day it's a different lane constraint. All those present challenges that we need to really focus on and make sure our operators are forward planning before they get to the change environment. So it's a major challenge for us, but it's a challenge for the people that we're sharing the road with. And there may not, the people we're sharing the road with are not necessarily the professional drivers that we train our operators, and so they're not as aware of what's going on in front of them until they actually get to it. So it's a dynamic that's very difficult for us to deal with. We're dealing with really severely increased congestion. The DOT website says that we've had 370 additional residents in New York City over the last 5 years, 500,000 new jobs, and 10 million more tourists than we did in 2010. All those present major challenges from a congestion standpoint and how we provide our service in the city streets. But probably most important is the proliferation of personal electronic devices. We have a really aggressive program to eliminate the use of PEDs with our bus operators. We worked with our union partners, and we have a very aggressive program for zero tolerance of cell phones. But that's certainly not what's out there for the people that we're dealing with, pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. What amazes me is watching a bicyclist take a selfie while he's driving on the right side of one of our buses. It's just, you see it time and time again. So those are all the things that we really need to be focused on. Some of the targeted safety programs, and I did a presentation to the board a few months back on our Vision Zero training program, and that really emphasizes the challenges of managing distracted pedestrian and cyclists. While we see collisions going up, we really need to focus on the collisions that are going to have catastrophic effects or impacts. And the catastrophic, a bus hitting a pedestrian or a cyclist has a great potential to be a catastrophic accident. And we really need to focus our operators on that. The program, which our operators are scheduled to all attend by next April, is one that really is very significant messaging, and we're using technology to really send a message home. And as I said earlier, Commissioner Brown, we're using onboard camera videos to show real incidents and share them in the training environment. Something we never did before this program, and it's something that is really a game changer in the attention that it gets from the people who are attending the training program. We also have a transitional operator training program. What we found is we have a really robust probationary review program. So a new operator in their first 12 months on the job is being monitored and really nurtured through his first year on the job. And then when they finish their probation and they're permanent employees with a little more freedom on their hands, we see a spike in their performance after they finish. Poor performance, I should say, after they finish their probation. So we bring all of these operators back upon completion of the probation and really share with them some of the nightmares that we see, some of their former colleagues had when they finished their probation. So they kind of give them a sense that, it's really important to do all the things while you're a permanent employee that you were doing while you're a probationary employee. And we've seen some significant impacts on that training program. And we expanded our random observation ride program. We added additional staff, and we do over 10,000 observation rides randomly. They are really meant to be constructive. They're for the most part, unless you're seen doing a really egregious event like running a red light or using your electronic device, which is prohibited. Most of the rides result in some kind of reinstruction or retraining if we see some deficiencies on them. So looking at our leading indicators, our Vision Zero training program, our goal is to finish getting everybody through the training program through next April, and we're on target to do that. Since we implemented the program, we have 8,600 operators trained. Back in January, I think Commissioner Pally asked, how do you know whether or not that training program has a positive impact or not? So using the results of our random check ride program, we have probably about 75 different deficiencies that we identify while we do our observation rides. And we catalog them and we track them because we want to use that information to give feedback into training programs. Even though we're not using them to pursue discipline, we're using them to improve our training program. We have a really robust database that shows us what are the tendencies and the things that our operators are doing out on the road when they don't think they're being observed, they don't think they have supervision watching them. So we looked at the pool of, or the database of operators who had observation rides, and we identified the operators who had an observation ride and also attended Division Zero training program. And we were able to identify over 2,300 rides involving operators who attended Division Zero. I broke that out and said, okay, how many of them had a ride before they attended Division Zero, and what were the results? And then how many had rides after they attended Division Zero, and what were the results? It's staggering results. What we found was in the first 30 days coming out of the training program, there was a 35% improvement in the violations that were identified as part of the ride. More significantly, we have a severity index on each of the violations, which is more egregious, which one has a potential for a more catastrophic kind of result or outcome, and which are some of the more minor ones that are that we want to just kind of like clean up. So when you add a severity index to it, with the seriousness of the kind of violation, that relationship pre and post Vision Zero training was even more significant. But what I'm most happy about is that from an adult learning theory, you attend the training program, and it's basically, the impact of that is really good for 90 days. And beyond 90 days, you kind of loses its impact. It actually starts to mitigate or diminish after 30 days. So when we look at the rides that were done more than 90 days after the people attended Vision Zero, and compare that to the rides that were done on people before they attended Vision Zero, it's not the same level of improvement over the previous one, but it's about a 23% improvement in seriousness of the violation. So there's a long-lasting impact of that training program. I think it goes a long way in just saying that the investment is paying off, and we got to figure out how to sustain it going on. As David said earlier, we just finished up the proof of concept on our pedestrian turn warning signal pilot, as well as our collision avoidance system pilot, and we're expanding those two. And we have an expansion to 200 buses underway for the pedestrian turn warning signal. I'm really, really excited about that one. And the collision avoidance system, we're expanding that to 145 buses, and that's a lot trickier because the algorithms have to be done in such a way that we're not creating too much noise for the operator so that he ignores it later on. And we're working really closely with our manufacturers and our vendors to make sure that we get that one right. The last thing is, under Darrell Eirich's leadership, we created an executive safety committee of his leadership team. And, the purpose of that is to make sure that we are ensuring that the safety culture is really obvious to the whole organization, that it comes from the top all the way down to the bottom, and that we're soliciting, feedback and input from all the stakeholders from the bottom up.
Any comments or questions? Jamie?
Are we tracking, on the bicycle incidents with buses, are we tracking city bike specifically versus other bikes? And if not, can we?
We had not until very recently, so we don't have data that goes back more than 3 or 4 months. But we did add an indicator in our database where we can isolate that out. Okay. But we had not done that until.
Okay. And as we do that, can we also track whether the rider was helmeted versus non-helmeted? Is that possible in the accident?
I'm sure it's possible. It's a matter of the reliability of that. I mean, but we can look into that.
Okay. And then thirdly, if we find that the statistics show that the city bike is an increasing part of those accidents, which I'm guessing you're going to find, maybe we could think about doing some of those educational things in conjunction with city bike, or maybe we're already thinking about that. But there's nothing right now when you go to a city bike station that encourages you not to text while you bike or anything like that. And I know I regularly get texts from colleagues who are telling me that I'm biking right now while I'm emailing you or texting you this. So maybe that's something we can think about as part of that education program.
We did release a PSA a year ago in December with exactly that, and that was on the air for quite a while. I don't know when it actually stopped.
Yeah, I
pretty much
just-
made it through.
maybe there's something
the
the
last
city-
baseball season. Yeah.
City Bike could do. They have other things on the physical. They know how to advertise on the bike. Maybe they could also do some safety on the bike.
We certainly have people at City Bike who understand our nature of operation, so we will, but it's a very good point. It's a very good point. Chuck?
Do we have any data showing whether or not the policy in New York City to constrain traffic by eliminating various lanes of traffic and the like are having any impact at all on our ability to provide safety?
I mean, I look at that all the time, and it's almost like you're sitting in on a conversation I might have had with some other folks. I mean, in all reality, when you constrain your travel lane, you're trying to put the same number of cars through a much smaller space. So what I'm seeing, and when I relate to my data analysis of our accidents, I'm seeing low severity, high volume, low severity kind of accidents. And I attributed some of that exactly to that. But I don't know that it's necessarily unsafe if you look.
I wonder if you could take, for example, just the west side of Manhattan, so that you don't make this too large a job, and try and track the extent to which
Just the west side of Manhattan. I'm not laughing at you, Chuck. That is a
You're
large area.
absolutely right. But they think of themselves as a separate republic. And I'm not joking. If you take a section and see the extent to which there has been an increase, I have the strong hunch that you're going to find a significant increase under this policy. Because if nothing else, it increases road rage.
I'll take a look at that.
Both of you mentioned the issue of, and harping to some degree on what Chuck indicated, that each day the traffic environment changes. A lane that was there yesterday may not be there today. Whatever it is, Con Ed may be doing work in the middle of the road, whatever happens. When do our operators find that out? Do they only find it out when they get to that point? Or is there a system by which the city and/or utilities and/or anyone else that restricts the roadway in some way informs somebody that, by the way, when you get to 14th Street, this is what you're going to find today. You didn't find it yesterday, but this is what you're going to find today.
So if it's something that just occurred, clearly the first operator that comes upon it is going to be experiencing it without any forewarning. But we have a pretty aggressive, I should say, a road operations group. We have people responsible for each of our routes, and that information is communicated on pullout. Dispatchers along the way are sharing that information. Like I said earlier, our operators have a lot more forewarning, and they're trained to be looking at it. So I think that's less of an issue. It just makes it really difficult for them to navigate through it. But for the most part, unless it's something that just happened, the operators are aware of it. And we have route managers and dispatchers that are feeding that information, and we do tell-alls on our bus radio system to operators on individual route about a particular area that may be a challenge to them.
Good morning. Metro North employee injuries are up 9% versus the previous 12-month rolling average. The major cause of this is slips, trips, and fall. So some of the things we are doing to address this is we've put an enhanced focus during our safety focus day. So we touch on proper walking methods, things of that nature. We've also completed our yard cleanups at 6 of our operating districts. We put an enhanced focus on our job safety briefings before each task is completed. And we have enhanced methods for reporting of unsafe conditions. So now we have our safety hotline, we have a safety email, and then we also have our intranet where employees can report unsafe conditions anonymously. Next slide, please. Customer injuries are down 33% versus the previous 12-month rolling average. However, with this, we want to continue the positive trends. Some of the things that we have done is we've inspected all 124 stations, both in the evening and the morning, so we could see both, see the conditions under both daytime and evening. We've also repainted the platforms for Watch the Gap, so that sign is more clear to our passengers. And we have reinstituted our Best Foot Forward campaign. This includes Watch the Gap and proper use of electronic devices while on the railroad. Moving on to our C3RS corrective actions that have been implemented. So this is something we've spoke about for quite some time, and we had promised that we'd present it to you. Here, our first one is hang tag. So the way this works is our engineer has temporary speed restrictions as part of each trip. So what they will do now is they will write all of them on this dry erase hang tag, and they'll put it around the throttle, as you'll see in the picture on the right-hand side. And that way it's a constant reminder throughout the entire trip of where the temporary speed restrictions are, so they never forget it now. Moving on to the next corrective action. Here, this is our daily train operations bulletin order. If you look at the first table on the top, item 1, CP5 to CP106, you can see milepost 5 to 6, it's temporary speed restriction at 30 miles an hour. And then if you look at item 2, it's from 6.3 to 7.4. So in theory, the engineer would operate 30 miles an hour between 5.0 and 6.0, and then he would increase to 60 between 6.0 and 6.3, and then reduce back prior to 6.3, so he's back within this temporary speed restriction. However, if you look at the table at the bottom, we've actually gone item 1, it says milepost 5.0 to milepost 7.4. So what we've done now is we've included that 0.3 of a mile within the temporary speed restriction. So although this will somewhat impact on-time performance, we have put safety before that, and now all the engineer has to focus on is that one speed restriction instead of trying to keep in mind 2 speed restrictions, throttle up, throttle back down, throttle back up. He just keeps it 30 miles an hour during the entire duration. Moving on to our final corrective action that has been implemented is our job safety briefing aid. This is obviously a very important thing for us. This is something that's completed before each task. And what we've done through the PRT is we've developed this, it's just a training aid. It's laminated. They keep it with them every day, and it just gives them a guidance on what they need to touch on as part of each job safety briefing. So that way it's consistent with all of our employees. They're talking about the same things. They're not forgetting items to talk about. So that's our final corrective action.
Any questions? If not, next presentation.
Good morning. We're fortunate at the Long Island Railroad that we've been trending down on our customer and employee injuries, and we wanted to just highlight some of the observations that we're making. So on the employee injury front, two very important keys for us, that our efforts are collaborative, so there's things that are happening at the corporate level and the department level in partnership with labor, and that it's also very strategic. We've spent a lot of time this morning talking about data and how important the data is. For us, the data is critical, that we can focus our attention and our intervention on the areas that require that. So through the data, we're able to take a focused approach. And we've listed a number of different avenues that we're doing that through. So whether it's our corporate quarterly focus days, through department videos, newsletters, meetings, and as a result of our look at our employee engagement, our observations in our environment, we've experienced a 37% downward trend for slip, trips, falls. And like with all the other agencies, slip, trip, fall incidents account for the large majority of our reportable injuries. What we're also noticing, though, this year, though, is historically soft tissue injuries, the sprains and the strains, historically accounted for about 47%. We're up to 65% of injuries over the period this year. So that's something that we're also focusing on. On the customer injury front, we found, in partnership with our transportation partners in Penn Station, 40% of all of our reportable customer injuries, no surprise, happen in Penn Station, as that happens to also be our highest volume terminal on the property. Working in partnership with the agencies, we identified that slips, trips, falls is a common occurrence for whether it's Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, New York City Transit. And with that in mind, drilling down even further to the data, Obviously, we all do station inspections and work to make sure that the environment is conducive for folks to travel through, but really that behavior was of great concern. Things that people were carrying, how they were perhaps rushing for trains or to get the subway or to get out of the station. So we've developed a campaign that builds upon the customer courtesy campaign, the Bubble People, to focus and drill down those safety messages with the idea that we all want to let's travel together safely through Penn Station. So we've seen a significant increase in slip, trips, and falls in Penn Station over the course of these campaigns, and each year it's going down in the double digits. So we hope to continue to work with our partners through things like the Customer Safety Awareness Days to keep that trend going. Also want to talk about our confidential close call corrective actions that have been implemented. Our crews expressed a concern out at Stony Brook. There's a pedestrian crossing that, because of the circuitry out there, would sometimes time out as the train was traversing after a train had stopped to either pick up or discharge their passengers. So as a result of the recommendations from our peer review team and in collaboration with transportation and engineering departments, a crossing gate key box controller was installed at the end of the platform. So now our crews can actually go down and key the pedestrian gate either up or down based on the movement of their train, so that they don't have to be concerned that it would inadvertently will time out as they're traversing over the crossing. The second corrective action that was implemented was this passenger train briefing guide, and similar to Metro North, it provides a checklist. We are very concerned about crews platforming properly, operating doors properly, that this provides a checklist for our crews to go through to ensure that job assignments have been talked about and assignments made. Also focuses on how they should interact with each other. It highlights the importance of rail resource management, being vigilant and remaining in the zone as they're operating through certain areas of territory. It also provides a guideline for reverse moves, which is another area of heightened vigilance for our crews as they're operating. So these are two corrective actions that we wanted to highlight, and we look forward to reporting on more as we progress through the next couple of months.
Any questions for Lori? Chuck?
Quick question. Have you focused on or collected any data on luggage that is left between the seats, particularly going out to the Hamptons in the summer, the aisles?
When we have that level of detail in the reports, we do try to capture that. Most of our accidents actually happen off the trains. 65% of them happen in either the stations or on the platforms. When it's on the train, we do look at luggage as being a contributing factor in the congestion within the train itself. Our crews do a phenomenal job of trying to remind folks to keep the aisles clear and keep the vestibules clear, but that is an ongoing challenge, and folks need to be mindful of each other when they're doing that.
Next presentation.
Good morning. In keeping up with previous presenters, I will talk to you about our most important lagging and leading indicators that we present to you on a monthly basis to the board. And those are rates of vehicle collisions with and without injuries, rates of employee lost time injuries, rates of contractor lost time injuries. On the first slide, we show two graphs, one on the top which indicates overall collisions for the last 20 years, and in the bottom the graph shows the injuries with collisions with injuries for the last 20 years as well. So as you can see on the slide, for the first 10 years or so, we've had a pretty good downward trend. For the last 10 years or so, we've kind of plateaued at around 5 collisions per million crossings on average, and about 1 or so of those injuries collisions produces an injury. So to put it a little bit into perspective, we have on a good year, we have about 300 million crossings a year, and on average about 1 million cars a day cross our bridges. So that is about 5 collisions a day for 9 of our facilities, and of those 5, only 1 will produce or result in an injury. So when we look at these numbers, we look at types of injury, types of collisions. What are they telling us? Also, we look at factors. So about 87% of all of the collisions are either rear end or side swipes. That's a significant number. Also, factors that play a significant role in these collisions seem to be following too closely, unsafe lane changes, or driver inattentiveness, and they account for about 87% of total collisions. So it's safe assumptions that driver behaviors have a lot to do with some of these collisions. Also, we look at the time, but when do these accidents happen, and we look at it's a pretty evenly distributed number. So AM rush hour, it's about 21% of collisions, 28% is midday, and about 32% of all collisions happen during rush hour, PM rush hour, and 19% during the evening or night hours. So what are we doing? What have we been doing in order to try to mitigate these issues, at least from our end? We continue to enforce speed enforcement, lane restriping and upgrade, signage upgrade, and roadway upgrade as we see it on our bridges. Also installation of channelization devices. And also we have something, accident mapping, where we look at where are these accidents happening for the most part, and if we see an area that is prone to more accidents, we try to concentrate our efforts specifically in that area. Moving on to the next slide. In this slide, we show rates of employee lost time injuries for 200,000 work hours, and also we give you a pretty good slice in time, about 20 years average rates from 1996 to 2015. And as you can see, in the first several years, from 1996 to about 2000, we saw a significant decrease in lost time injuries. In the last 10 years or so, we've plateaued again with a rate around 3, slightly higher in the last few years with alternating trends, 1 year higher, 1 year lower. But what I would like to emphasize is that, first of all, we have roughly about 70 injuries a year. And most of our lost time injuries, about 75% of them, involve our officers on the busy plazas. And most of our injuries are either very light, soft tissue type of injuries, such as sprains and strains that result from slips, trips, and falls that we've heard before. So I said that they're not very severe, and to add to that argument, we show the slide, next slide, I'm sorry, the same slide, but the bottom graph, we show the lost time days per injury, and as you can see, from 2011 to 2015, and including this year, we see a pretty good downward trend in terms of how many lost days were generated as a result of these injuries. So what have we been doing, and what are we doing to keep doing good work and trying to even bring these numbers further down? We look at increased safety awareness, and hazard awareness. So, for example, every day before our officers are dispatched to their work site, we have something called roll call, during which we talk about risk, safety hazard, and we talk about changing conditions, especially during winter months when ice and whatever may impede their work. So we also look at increased training, toolbox training for our workforce, specialized training. One important aspect that an initiative that we have undertaken in the last year has been creating a safety task force, which is comprised of our management, of our union representatives, and our safety and health representatives, with a job to go from facility to facility on a regular basis, basically see, recommend, and fix. So they talk about trends, they talk about accidents, they talk about what we need to do to make these numbers go down, and that's really the essence, and it's been a very, very good initiative. Moving to the next slide. As you know, we have a very robust capital construction program led by our very capable engineering and construction department. And in this slide, we show, in this graph, we show a contractor injuries from 2010 through 2015. And here you can also see a pretty good downward trend with specifically last year and a half, we have about 35% decrease in contractor lost injuries. That is coupled with the very increased volume of work that we've had in the last year and a half. So we see two trends that are very good. One is that the volume of work is going up while the trends for the collisions and for the accidents is going down. That's a very good trend, and we are very pleased with that. What are the factors that have played a role in this? for the most part, increased focus on safety. It's been a top-down approach from our president down to our all levels of management, to project managers, safety personnel, and also contractors. We demand of them to work efficiently and safely. Use of our leading indicators, such as training, inspections, increased in number, especially inspections in the last year and a half or so. Increased number of regular meetings, safety meetings, but also stand-downs. Anytime we have either a near miss or somewhat of a serious accident, we require the contractor to have a stand-down so we can look and see and find root cause of a potential accident so we can learn from them. Visibility, presence, outreach, especially with our ENC, Engineering Construction Safety Group, as well as Safety and Health, teaming together and being visible as much as possible and really making a change and trying to drive these numbers down. So all of these factors play an important role in driving these numbers down as we continue to work safe and efficiently. If you have questions, please feel free to ask.
Mr. Merdler?
Do you have any data arising out of the electronic toll collection at the Henry Hudson Bridge as to the positive impact that has had on both customer injuries and employee injuries?
Yes, as a matter of fact, about a year and a half or so, we have the data for the customer collisions, which have gone down about 40% since we introduced our AET at the Henry Hudson. Also, collisions for that facility, customer accidents for that facility have gone down significantly.
That's an important statistic.
Yes.
Mitch?
One would assume that most of our customer accidents occur prior to getting to the toll booth, leaving the Henry Hudson out of the equation for the moment, as opposed to after they get through the toll booth. So it's a question of people trying to find, for lack of a better term, not only the correct lane to go through, but the fastest correct lane to go through. And that leads to the movements, some of which have common sense and some of which don't, to cause what we clearly see is happening in that regard.
Yeah, what we do is, as I mentioned before, one of the areas of concern for us is proper striping of lanes, just making them really visible, sometimes even making them almost like with a ramble strip so you're aware that you're changing lanes, especially as you approach the plaza. But most of our accidents are actually happening on the roadway, on the span, about 75%. One thing, as I mentioned before, the fact that most of them lead to very minor injuries is that they're low-speed fender bender types, and even injuries that we see are, for the most time, self-reported minor injuries. We don't really see but we're going to take your point very well. We're going to try to.
So one of the benefits of having too many people on the bridge going slowly is that the accident, when it occurs, is a smaller accident, as opposed to going 55 or 60 miles an hour in that regard.
Yes.
So, but it does have an impact in that regard.
That is correct. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
One of the things we need to see play out over time, first of all, there was a conscious decision by Bridges and Tunnels to go through automatic electronic tolling and then go to open road tolling, and there's a difference between the two, if you don't know, to be provided at a later date.
Yes.
Second issue is, as they change a plaza over from one form of toll collection to another, the last step in the process is the removal of the toll booths. Long before you remove them, though, you're stopping to collect tolls there. So the issue of channelization from a traffic engineering standpoint needs to be dealt with, and that's something that's not lost on us, because once you open up that plaza, you do have to do different things from channelization to make sure that you don't have conflicts at higher speed in merging of cars. So
What ends up happening is you go from, in most cases, 3 lanes to 10 lanes to 3 lanes, or in some context of that, so that the driver is trying to get through at the fastest speed possible, and the bridge itself, or the tunnel, whatever it is, has a restricted number of lanes, because that's what it was built, regardless of how many lanes we think it should have, and how many lanes the toll booth has, or where there are no toll booths, how many lanes of flow traffic there happens to be.
Yeah, those are the challenges that we are looking into, and hopefully we'll come up with solutions that will prevent and will be, the roadways will be safer. We'll look at every possible avenue to try to
One
mitigate
further
those
question,
issues.
and we get one last presentation. Chuck?
Just one quick question.
Sure.
There is technology now out that allows cars to be cautioned when they're straying off their lane. Is there any application for that in this process on the bridges?
We look at technology every day to see what we can do. Obviously, cars of today are far better and equipped with this type of equipment, but I think looking at the data that we have is really the behavior or driving behavior of the motorist. And we mentioned with the driver inattentiveness and things of that nature that are really driving force behind these collisions. But we will look at every possible way to make our roadways safer.
Okay, let's move to the last presentation, please.
Good morning. I would like to focus today on the conversion of the lagging to leading indicator strategies that began for MTACC in 2014. In front of you, slide 1 is the results of the strategies we have put in place, and you can see that the LT rates have had a severe reduction from 2014 to 2015, which meant that 2014 was sort of the pilot to implement the 2015 strategy as a whole. I would like to really focus on the process. And the process is essentially a continuous improvement process that partners the contractor, the program, and OSIP with a audit of performance within the months. And this is based on approximately 50 categories that identify hazardous conditions or behaviors. And what it basically means that we collect, we analyze, we provide inputs, and convert to a leading indicator strategy. This is with a partnering with a contractor, and essentially implement. And once again, we audit to see whether there was a delta from the objective to the reality. And the next page is something that essentially drives how do we go about the various strategies. The first one, we collect injuries into 14 categories. It's not just injuries that are bodily injuries, but it's also time and place of these injuries. So if you look at the first chart, it shows as to at what time of a shift does the injury occur. That leads to a management span of control strategy. If you go to the next one on the left, that's the injury by hazard category. That then defines what are the certain areas that will require a leading indicator strategy, be it for the months, be it for a quarter, but it is monitored based on a month-to-month results. And the third one, as an example, is injury by time in a trade. What is really surprising is that if you look at it, that most of the injury occurs to those that are in a trade longer than 10 years. And that is essentially due to complacency. But it leads to another trend, and that is training, education, and overall potential disciplinary actions on a job. Leading indicators. New employee training, that's orientation. Site inspection, increased site inspections that are collaborative with management involved in these initiatives. Program contractor strategies meeting, toolbox talks, daily on-site job review by competent persons, and safety. Safe work plan and construction work plan review. Is the construction work plan meeting the safety work plan goal? JHAT as a job hazard analysis. Those are audits and contractor compliance monitoring. And then finally, monthly, quarterly reports and audits. We provide on a monthly basis reports of the performance to the contractor. We sit down with the contractor and we review with them as to what has been accomplished versus what needs to be accomplished. Leading to lagging indicators. Basically, the process repeats itself. Increased site inspections lead to high identification of more unsafe conditions and behavior on site. New employee orientation, toolbox talks, training, and leading indicators focus. It's to increase safety awareness on a job. And then contract compliance, which is contractor strategies, meetings, safety meetings, joint hazard assessment, audits, ACE evaluation. Well, the result is quite nice. We have been able to reduce from 2014 to 2015 by 38%, which is, I believe, a significant drop. And I'm happy to inform you that 2016 is on track to either improve or at least not get any worse than it is. And that's it for me.
Any questions? I apologize in some ways that we went over our time, but I think we made a commitment as a board that we were going to have these meetings at the time of the board meeting so we could all be here. If our commitment to safety is going to be limited by time, that's not sending the right message. That concludes the business of the Safety Committee for July 2016. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor, aye. We'll start the board meeting in 5 minutes.